Hello everyone, welcome to this session. In this session, we are going to discuss about data type and variable. Let's understand about data type first. What is data type? Data types are required to specify the type of value used in a program. Data types are used to create a variables. There are two types of data type in Java, primitive data type and non-primitive data type. Primitive data type has a fixed size which is predefined. Primitive data types are always in a non-object format, whereas non-primitive data type do not have any specific size, and non-primitive data types are always in the object format. This is the classification of the data type, primitive and non-primitive. Primitive further classify into four parts. First one is integer, then floating, character, and boolean. And non-primitive has these different types. In this session, we are going to discuss about the primitive data type only. In the primitive data type, there are four categories and every category is used to store a different type of value. Like integer is used to store a numeric value without any decimal number. Floating point is used to store a numeric value again, but you can store here values with the decimal point. In a character, you can store a char type of value, single character, or you can store a symbol, or you can store a numeric value as well. But there are some restrictions to store a numeric value inside character, which we'll discuss in the next slide. There is one more data type, which is Boolean, which used to store a true and false value. Let's discuss about these four categories in more detail here. First one is integer. As we discussed, it is used to store a numeric value, which is without any decimal number. The value can be negative and positive both, and examples are this. In a floating point, you can store a value which is with or without decimal number. This value again can be a positive or negative, and these are few examples of the floating type of values. The next is character. In a character, you can store alphabets, numbers, and symbols. There can be maximum one alphabet stored inside a character. Can store a numeric values also inside character, but those values must be non-decimal values and only positive values are allowed. So you cannot store a negative values and the values which has a decimal point inside character. Character values has to store in a single code only if it is alphabet or symbol. The last one is the Boolean. In Boolean, you can store a true and false value. In Java, 0 and 1 will not consider as a true and false when you execute or when you use this Boolean value in your program or while writing a code. You have to use a true or false value only. 0 and 1 is not considered as a true and false while writing a code. This is about a primitive data type. As we discussed, data types are used to create a variables. And if you want to store a values inside your program or your code, then you have to create a variables. So let's discuss about variable as well. The use of variable is used to hold an attribute of data for an instance variable, assigning the value of one variable to another, representing values within a mathematical expression. So if you wanted to do any calculations, you can use variable, you can store your values inside variable and use it in a calculation. You can print these values on a screen as an output, holding a reference to another object. These are few use of the variables. If you wanted to create a variable, then you have to follow specific syntax. Let's discuss about how you can use create a variable in your Java code. There are two steps. One is declaration and another one is initialization. In the declaration, you have to specify which type of value you wanted to store in your program by providing a data type and the name of your variable. This is just a declaration of the variable. In the initialization, we'll assign value to an identifier. Here we are creating a value or we are providing a value to our variable, which is initialization step. Both of these steps can be combined on a single line like this, where we are specifying a data type, we are providing name of the variable, which is identifier, and we are specifying a value. This is a syntax by using which you can create a variable, and every variable must have a data type, and we can store a value of that specific type of value inside that variable. There are few rules which you have to follow while creating variable. The rules is for long, float, char, and boolean. If you are creating a long type of variable, then long value should be created with the prefix capital L or small l. For example, if you are storing a phone number, then the phone number or this value has to be end with a capital L or small l. Otherwise, you will get an compile time error. So this is one of the rule for long. For a float, the value must be created with a capital F or small f. Here, the providing capital F and a small f as a suffix is mandatory. For example, if you are storing a gravity value 9.8, then this value has to be end with or has to be suffixed with a capital F or small f. Then for a character, you can store a single character and symbol as a value. There must be a single quote. The character value must be stored inside a single quote. And for numeric, as we discussed in the earlier slide, the value must be a non-decimal value and it must be a positive value. Here are a few examples of valid and invalid character. So first one is a valid character where we are storing a single character inside single quote. Then we are storing a @ symbol, which is again in a single quote. If you wanted to store any numeric value, then single quote is not necessary or you must not have to use a single quote. And if you try to store a negative value, then again it will be a compile time error. This is the rule for character data type. The next is Boolean. In a Boolean, as we discussed, true and false value only allowed. When you use it in your program, your value has to be true or false only, and 0 and 1 is not allowed. These are some rules which you have to remember while creating a variable. When you create a variable, suppose if you wanted to, if you are performing any calculation, let's say you are multiplying the two numbers, two integer numbers, and their multiplication is going into a long type, or its size will get into a long data type, then you will require a casting. So casting is a process where you can convert your value from one data type to another data type. So casting is a process which you can convert the value from one data type to another data type. There are two types of casting, implicit and explicit casting. Implicit casting is a conversion of the data type from one data type to another, which happens internally. Here, Java will help us to convert this value automatically from one data type to another. For example, suppose I am creating a variable byte, and byte value I wanted to convert into integer. So it can be happen internally, which is called as implicit casting. But if you wanted to convert a value of large data type to a small data type, so here I'm considering a large and small data type by considering their size. So byte is of 8 bits and integer is of 32 bits. So it is easy to convert these 8 bits of data into 32 bits, which happen internally. But if you wanted to do a reverse, that means if I wanted to convert an integer type of value, which is of 32 bits into a 8-bit, then we need an implicit casting. In that case, Java doesn't support this casting internally. So explicit casting is a conversion of from one data type to another data type. Here, we will have to do manually, else compiler will give you an compile time error. Explicit casting can give you logically incorrect output if you handle it inappropriately. The example is, here I am storing a integer type of value. I have an integer type of value x, and I wanted to convert it into a byte. If we directly try to convert it, then it will be a compile time error because we are trying to convert a 32 bits of data into a 8 bits. So here we have to add this bracket, which is a part of explicit casting. Through a explicit casting, we are converting this x value into a byte, and then it will be assigned to a y variable. This is mandatory in the case of explicit casting. Programmatically, we have to handle it. This is about converting your value from one data type to another data type. Let's discuss about what are the different type of variables. The variables type are decided based on the position of it. That means where you create a variable, on the basis of that, it will decide the type of variable. There are three types of variable: local variable, instance variable, and static variable. The local variable is created inside a method is called local variable. These variables can be accessed inside a method only, and it cannot be accessed outside method. Local variables have to initialize before use, else compiler will give you an error. Instance variable is a variable which is created inside a class and outside any method. These variables can be accessed in all the methods of the class, which is non-static. These variables cannot be accessed in a static method. We'll discuss about it in the later sessions. But just remember this thing, the instance variable can be accessed in a non-static method directly. In a static methods, we cannot use the instance variable directly. If you do not initialize the instance variable, then Java will initialize it with a default value when you create an object of the class. We'll discuss about this default value in the next slide. The third type of the variable is static variable or class variable. The variable which is created inside class and outside any method using a static keyword is called a static or class variable. These variables can be accessed in all the methods of the class. If you don't initialize the static variables, then it will get an initialized by default value at the time of class loading. So static variables can be accessed within a class in any of the method. Either it can be a static or non-static method, you can access these variables. And these variables also get initialized by a Java if you don't initialize manually. We'll discuss about these default values in the next slide. This is the table for the default value. So every primitive and non-primitive data type will initialize with a default value if that variable is of type instance or a static variable. If you are creating your instance or static variable of type byte, then the value will be 0. For byte, short, int, long, the value will be 0. For a float and double, it will be 0.0. In case of float, as we discussed, it has to be a f as a suffix. For double, you can use d. It is not mandatory. You can skip this. For a character, the 0 value will be stored and it is represented in ASCII as /u000. Boolean by default value is false, and for all non-primitive variables, the default value will be null. So these are the default values which will get assigned, or your instance or static variable will get initialized if you don't provide a value. This is all about the data type and variable discussion. We'll discuss about the practical implementation of these things in the next session. Thank you for joining the session.